In the dimly lit Cathedral of Tours, the air was thick with incense and the faint echo of distant chanting. Gregory of Tours, a man of the church, stood before the grand altar, his eyes fixed on the flickering candles that cast eerie shadows on the stone walls. It was the year 594, and Gregory, now in his late 50s, felt the weight of his years and the burden of his experiences pressing down on him. But it was not the years that made him weary. It was the stories he had seen and the truths he had uncovered. Gregory was born in 538, in a time when the world was a place of constant turmoil and shifting loyalties. His family, the Gallo-Romans, were a powerful and influential clan, with many of his kinsmen serving as bishops in various cities. Gregory himself was no stranger to the church, having spent his early years in the households of his uncle, Bishop Gallus of Clermont, and his great-uncle, Bishop Nicias of Lyons. These were formative years, where the young Gregory learned the ways of the church and the complexities of the world outside its walls. But it was not just the church that shaped Gregory. The Merovingian kings, with their constant feuds and power struggles, were a constant presence in his life. When Gregory was a young deacon in 563, the kingdom was torn apart by the conflicts between the sons of Clothar I. These wars were brutal and unforgiving, and Gregory saw firsthand the toll they took on the people. He witnessed cities burning, families torn apart, and innocents suffering. It was during this time that Gregory began to write, not just to record events, but to make sense of the chaos around him. In 573, at the age of 35, Gregory was appointed Bishop of Tours by King Sigebert I. This was a time of great change and uncertainty. The city of Tours, with its surrounding lands and fortresses, was a key strategic point in the kingdom. Gregory's role was not just spiritual. He was also a mediator, a judge, and a diplomat. He had to navigate the complex web of royal politics, often finding himself caught between warring factions. His relationships with the counts, the secular officials appointed by the king, were often tense. Leudas, the Count of Tours, was a particularly thorny figure, loyal to one king one day and another the next. Gregory had to be careful, for the wrong word or action could mean the difference between life and death. But it was not just the political landscape that Gregory had to navigate. The church itself was a place of intrigue and conflict. Gregory's relations with other bishops, especially those in the old province of Lugdunensis Tertia, were often strained. Bishop Felix of Nantes, for example, was a constant thorn in his side, and their disagreements sometimes threatened to spill over into open conflict. Gregory had to maintain a delicate balance, ensuring that the church remained a force for good in a world that often seemed to be descending into madness. Despite the challenges, Gregory never lost sight of his mission. He traveled widely, both to attend ecclesiastical councils and to serve the needs of the people. In 585, he even acted as a spokesman for King Childebert II, addressing an envoy from the court of King Guntram of Burgundy. 3 years later, he was sent as an envoy himself, a task that required all his diplomatic skills and a deep understanding of the political landscape. Gregory's writings, including his famous Histories, were a testament to his life's work. The Histories, a 10-book chronicle, began with the creation of the world and the early biblical history, but quickly shifted to the events of his own time. It was a work that intertwined the spiritual and the secular, the divine and the human. Gregory's hagiographic works, such as his accounts of the wonders and the life of the fathers, provided a counterpoint to the often grim and violent world he described. These stories of saints and miracles were a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, there was still hope and a higher purpose to be found. As Gregory stood in the cathedral that day, he reflected on the path that had brought him to this point. He had seen the best and the worst of humanity, the heights of human achievement and the depths of human depravity. But through it all, he had remained committed to his faith and his mission. The Histories was not just a record of events. It was a moral and theological reflection on the human condition. It was a story of a world in flux, a world where the line between good and evil was often blurred, but where the light of faith and the power of the church could still shine through. And so, as the candles burned and the chanting continued, Gregory prepared to write the final chapters of his Histories. In the world of history, Gregory of Tours stands out as a major figure, especially when it comes to understanding the 6th century in France. His work, the Histories, is a valuable source, but it's not without its complexities. As Gregory's reputation as a historian has grown, the way his Histories is read has changed. People now realize that Gregory, like most historians, had a specific way of looking at the world and the events he wrote about. This perspective shaped his writing and the way he presented history. It's important to understand this when reading his work, as it helps us see history not just as a series of events, but as a reflection of how Gregory saw the world. The Histories is a large and detailed work, covering events from the time of Clovis, the first king of the Franks, to Gregory's own time. It's divided into 10 books, each covering a period of time or a set of events. The way Gregory wrote his history reflects his role as a bishop and his deep religious beliefs. He often saw events as part of a larger moral and theological story, where good and evil, saints and sinners, played out their roles. To make the Histories more accessible, this book presents selections from books the second to X, focusing on the political narrative. This means that some parts of the original, like Gregory's accounts of saints and their miracles, are left out. This approach helps to focus on the political history of the time, but it also means that readers might miss some of the moral and religious context that Gregory intended. One of the key things to understand about the Histories is its structure. Gregory organized his books around the reigns of the Frankish kings, particularly those of Austrasia, the kingdom he was most familiar with. For example, Book the Second ends with the death of Clovis, the founder of the Frankish kingdom, and Book the Third ends with the death of Theudebert I, a powerful king of Austrasia. From Book the Fifth onwards, Gregory used the regnal years of Childebert II, the king of Austrasia, to organize his narrative. This structure reflects Gregory's political and religious loyalties, as well as his view of history as a series of episodes where God's plan unfolds. Reading the Histories can be like piecing together a puzzle. Gregory's narrative is often episodic, meaning it jumps between different events and themes, mixing political and religious stories. This can make it seem disjointed, but it also allows Gregory to highlight the moral and theological aspects of the events he describes. For example, he might tell a story about a political conflict, then follow it with a story about a saint's miracle, showing how both the political and the spiritual worlds are connected. Gregory's perspective on the events he describes is also important to consider. He wrote about the people and events he knew, and his opinions often come through in his writing. For example, he had a particularly negative view of King Chilperic, whom he called a Nero and Herod of our time. His descriptions of other rulers, like Childebert and Brunhild, are more nuanced, reflecting the complex relationships and power dynamics of the time. Understanding Gregory's Histories also means recognizing the limitations of his writing. He was a man of his time, and his views were shaped by his religious and political beliefs. This means that his account of events, while valuable, is not always objective. For instance, his descriptions of events in Italy and the Empire are sometimes inaccurate, and his focus on Frankish history means that he doesn't always provide a complete picture of the wider world. In this chapter, we will explore the political narrative of the Histories, following the structure of Gregory's work. We will look at the reigns of the Frankish kings, the conflicts between different factions, and the role of religion in the politics of the time. By the end, you should have a better understanding of how Gregory saw the world, and how he presented the history of his time. The Merovingian kingdom in northern Gaul was founded by a young man named Clodovchus, better known as Clovis. Around the year 481, Clovis, who was just about 15 years old, became king after his father Childeric died. Childeric was a Frankish king who worked closely with the Roman military and church leaders in northern Gaul. In 1653, Childeric's tomb was discovered in Tournai in modern-day Belgium, filled with valuable treasures. When Clovis became king, a bishop named Remigius wrote to him, welcoming him as the new ruler of a region called Belgica Secunda, which was a Roman province. One of Clovis's first major victories was against a Roman leader named Syagrius, who ruled from Soissons. Clovis also defeated the Alemanni, a Germanic tribe, and brought more Frankish groups under his control. In 500, he fought against the Burgundians, led by King Gundobad, but Gundobad managed to keep his power. However, in 507, Clovis won a crucial battle against the Visigoths, led by King Alaric II at Voul. This victory pushed the Visigoths out of southern Gaul and made Spain their new home. Clovis made Paris his capital, and in a significant moment, he was baptized as a Catholic by Bishop Remigius of Rheims. This was a big deal because Clovis was the first major king of the Franks to convert from Arian Christianity to Catholicism, which helped him gain the support of the Catholic Church and the Roman population. When Clovis died, his kingdom was divided among his 4 sons, Theuderic I, Clodomir, Childebert I, and Clothar I. Over the next few decades, these sons and their successors continued to expand the Frankish kingdom. In 532, Theuderic I and Cloth the first conquered the Thuringian kingdom, and in 534, they took over Burgundy with the help of Childebert I. The Ostrogoths gave up control of Provence in 537, making the Frankish kingdom a significant power along the Mediterranean. The Franks, led by Theuderic I's son, Theudebert I and grandson Theudebald, even got involved in wars in Italy but didn't achieve lasting success there. In 558, Clothar I, the last of Clovis's sons, briefly united the Frankish kingdom, but when he died in 561, it was divided again among his 4 sons, Charibert, Guntram, Sigebert, and Chilperic. These sons often fought each other for control. One of the most significant events was the assassination of Sigebert in 575, which left his young son Childebert II as the new king of Austrasia. Childebert was only 5 years old, so he was placed under the care of court officials, and his mother, Brunhild, tried to influence the court. In 577, Guntram of Burgundy, who had no children of his own, made an alliance with Childebert against Chilperic. This alliance was sealed by the Treaty of Stone Bridge. However, in 581, Austrasia switched sides and allied with Chilperic against Guntram, leading to the Treaty of Nogent. These shifting alliances caused a lot of conflict, and in 583, Childebert's army mutinied against the officials who were controlling Austrasia. In 584, Chilperic was assassinated, leaving behind a young son named Clothar II, who was protected by Guntram. Around the same time, a man named Gunduvald, who claimed to be a son of Clothar I, started a rebellion. Guntram quickly put down the rebellion, and in 585, relations between Burgundy and Austrasia improved. Brunhild, Childebert's mother, began to assert more control over her son, who was now older. In 587, a plot to take over Austrasia was discovered and quickly crushed. The same year, the Treaty of Andelot was signed between Austrasia and Burgundy, though tensions still existed. In 588, Austrasia helped the Byzantine Empire in Italy, and in 590, Bishop Egidius of Rheims was punished for his past dealings with Chilperic. Gregory of Tours, who wrote about these events, was a bishop and historian. His account, called the Histories, is the main source of information about this period. However, Gregory's account is sometimes biased and can be hard to verify with other sources. Modern historians have debated many aspects of Clovis's reign and the Merovingian kingdom, such as the exact date of Clovis's baptism and the nature of Merovingian kingship. Despite these debates, the Merovingian period was a time of significant change and conflict. The kingdom was often divided, and the relationships between the different regions and leaders were complex. Gregory's histories provide a detailed, if sometimes biased, picture of this fascinating era in early medieval history. Gregory of Tours wrote a lot about the history of the Franks, and his work has been translated into many languages, including English. 2 of the most famous English translations are by O.M. Dalton and Lewis Thorpe. Dalton's translation is in 2 volumes and includes a lot of background information, but it can be a bit outdated. Thorpe's translation is more modern and easier to read, but it might sometimes change the meaning a bit to make it sound more like everyday speech. There's also an abridged version by Ernest Brahout, which is good if you want to read about the main events without all the details. However, it doesn't cover everything, so you might miss some important parts. All these translations assume that Gregory wrote 2 versions of his history, a shorter one with 6 books and a longer one with 10 books, but this isn't true. The mistake was fixed a long time ago, and the correct title is just Histories, without mentioning the number of books. Gregory also wrote a lot about saints and their miracles. Some of these have been translated into English, like Life of the Fathers by Edward James, Glory of the Martyrs and Glory of the Confessors by Raymond Van Dam, and Suffering and Miracles of the Martyr St. Julian, and Miracles of the Bishop St. Martin by Van Dam in his book, Saints and Their Miracles in Late Antique Gaul. Gregory's work on church rituals, called On the Course of the Stars, has a part about the 7 wonders of the world. This part was translated by William C. McDermott in a book called Monks, Bishops, and Pagans, Christian Culture in Gaul and Italy, 500 to 700. Other important works from the same time include The Ruin of Britain by Gildas, The Gothic History by Jordanes, and The Secret History by Procopius. These are all translated into English and can help you understand the history of the Franks better. There are also other sources that can give you more information about the Franks and their society. For example, From Roman to Merovingian Gaul, a reader, by Alexander Callender Murray, includes many historical documents. Fredegar's Chronicle and the Liber Historiae Francorum are also important, and they have been translated by different authors. Books about the lives of saints, like Sainted Women of the Dark Ages, by Joe and McNamara, John E. Halborg, and E. Gordon Whatley, and Venantius Fortunatus, Personal and Political Poems by Judith George, can help you understand the religious life of the time. Many scholars have written about Gregory's work and the history of the Franks. Walter Goffart and Martin Heinzelmann have written important books that help us understand Gregory's histories better. Other scholars, like Peter Brown, have studied the cult of saints and how it affected society. For a deeper look at the Merovingian kings and their politics, you can read works by Roger Collins, William Dolly, and Paul Foraker. They discuss topics like the power of the kings, the role of the church, and the influence of the Gallic aristocracy. Books on the Merovingian military, like Merovingian Military Organization, by Bernard S. Bachrach, and the Merovingian Church, like The Merovingian Church, by J. M. Wallace Hadrill, can give you more insights into the society of the time. If you're interested in the everyday life of people during the Merovingian period, you can read about the civitates, the Roman cities that continue to exist, family ties, and the role of women. Authors like Susan Wemple, Make de Jong, and Patrick Geary have written about these topics. Archaeology can also provide a lot of information about the Merovingian period. Books like Before France and Germany, The Creation and Transformation of the Merovingian World, by Patrick Geary, and The Merovingian World, by Ian Wood, can help you understand the physical world the Franks lived in. These resources can help you dive deeper into the history of the Franks and the world that Gregory of Tours described. Each one offers a different perspective and can help you build a more complete picture of this fascinating period. As we close this journey through the thoughts of ancient historians, let's take a moment to understand why they wrote and what they believed about the act of writing history. Sidonius Apollinaris, a bishop from Clermont around the year 477, had a lot to say about this. He thought that writing history was a tricky business, especially for someone like him, who was a church leader. He warned that talking about the past can make you unpopular if you say good things about bad people, or if you criticize those in power. He believed that writing history can start with a grumpy mood, keep you busy for a long time, and end up making people angry at you. Sulpicius Severus, writing around the year 480, had a different take. He thought that writing about famous people was pointless. He asked, what good does it do to read about ancient warriors like Hector, or philosophers like Socrates? He believed that focusing only on the present world and its heroes was foolish. For Sulpicius, the most important things were eternal and spiritual, not the fleeting fame of this world. But what do these ancient thoughts mean for us today? Richard J. Evans, a modern historian, reminds us that historians have powerful tools to make their points without just saying, this was bad, or this was good. They can use humor, irony, and clever storytelling to show the truth. They can highlight moments of bravery and defiance, or expose the lies and selfishness of those in power. In this way, history can be a powerful way to understand the world, both past and present. So, as we finish this book, we can see that the act of writing history is more than just recording facts. It's about telling stories that matter, stories that help us understand the complexities of human nature and the world we live in. Whether it's the ancient historians like Sidonius and Sulpicius, or modern historians like Evans, the goal is the same: to make sense of the past and, in doing so, to help us navigate the present and the future.